The back row, the servants' table. The real estate mogul had orchestrated every moment of his ex-wife's public shame. Back row, far left, he'd written on her invitation in his own hand. But when the silver Rolls Royce Phantom glided past security to the main entrance, and she emerged draped in gold kente with 3 children clutching her gown, 400 guests at Vercelli Vineyards stopped breathing. The man stepping out behind her? Wesley Smith's new boss. Before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what brought you here today. Now, let's get started. I want her to see exactly what she threw away, Wesley Smith said, adding a name to the seating chart with calculated precision. And I want everyone there to witness the moment she realizes her mistake. Diana Barrett glanced up from her phone, her French manicured nails hovering over the screen. You're really inviting your ex-wife to our wedding? Wesley, is that wise? Wesley reclined in his leather chair, the Atlanta skyline sparkling through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their penthouse. At 38, he'd maintained his college physique through expensive personal trainers and carefully tailored suits that hid the effort it now required. His smile was practiced, commercial-ready, but never quite genuine. Trust me, babe. Abigail needs to be there. It's about closure. Final closure. Diana hesitated. At 28, she'd built her influence through strategic branding and aesthetic perfection. With 3.2 million followers dissecting her every post, their wedding was already trending as the social event of the season. Unnecessary drama wasn't part of her content strategy. You never talk about your first marriage, she said carefully. I don't really know what happened. Wesley's expression tightened before he smoothed it away. Not much to tell. 5 years with a woman who couldn't deliver what mattered most. He stood, walking to the window. She was pushing 38 when we divorced. Too consumed by her career, too set in her ways. I wanted a family. She couldn't give me that. Diana nodded, unaware of the fabrication hanging between them. She crossed to him, her engagement ring, a 4-carat diamond, catching the city lights. Our wedding will be flawless, she promised. $1 million for Vercelli Vineyards, custom Vera Wang, orchids from Ecuador. Everyone will remember this for years. Exactly, Wesley murmured, kissing her forehead, while his mind remained locked on Abigail. That's precisely the point. The following morning, Wesley sat in his corner office overlooking downtown Atlanta. Glass, steel, and marble surrounded him, a carefully constructed monument to success. On his desk lay the cream-colored envelope addressed to Dr. Abigail Amara. Mr. Smith? His assistant Natalie tapped on the doorframe. The wedding coordinator is here for your 10 o'clock. Send her in, Wesley replied, sliding Abigail's invitation into his drawer. Priya Desai entered with her tablet and leather portfolio. Good morning. I have wonderful updates on the Vercelli arrangements. For the next hour, Wesley approved extravagant details. Cascading floral installations, a live string orchestra, drone photography, lighting designed to make every Instagram story picture perfect. No expense was spared if it reinforced the image. The ceremony garden accommodates exactly 400 guests, Priya explained. We've arranged the seating to showcase the vineyard backdrop beautifully. Perfect, Wesley nodded. And the press coverage? We've confirmed 4 major lifestyle magazines and secured premium spots for top-tier influencers. Between Diana's following and the publications, you're looking at exposure to approximately 15 million people. Wesley smiled. 15 million witnesses to his triumph. 15 million people who would see Abigail relegated to the shadows where she belonged. After Priya left, Wesley retrieved Abigail's invitation. With his Mont Blanc pen, he inscribed a message on the enclosure card in precise script. Back row, far left, where you belong. That evening, Marcus Cole arrived at Wesley's office, carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of aged bourbon. As Wesley's best man and longest friend, Marcus was one of the few who knew the real history. "To your future," Marcus said, raising his glass without conviction. Wesley caught the hesitation. "What's the problem? You should be celebrating with me." Marcus set down his glass deliberately. "I saw Abigail's invitation on Natalie's desk this morning. Tell me you're not actually going through with this." "Of course I am." Wesley's voice went cold. "She needs to see what she walked away from." "It's been 3 years, Wes. You've got Diana now. Why can't you just move forward?" Wesley's jaw tightened. "Move forward? After what she did? Do you know what it's like having colleagues whisper, having clients assume you left your wife because she was too old to give you children?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "But you created that narrative, Wesley. You're the one who spread those rumors after the divorce." Wesley turned toward the window, unwilling to face the reflection staring back. 3 years earlier, in a sterile fertility clinic, he'd received news that shattered his carefully constructed identity. Not Abigail. Him. Wesley Smith, former college athlete, rising business star, was the one who couldn't have children naturally. Low sperm count. Poor motility. The doctor had mentioned options, donors, adoption, treatment protocols, but Wesley's ego couldn't absorb the blow. When Abigail had gently suggested they explore alternatives together, he couldn't bear her compassion. It felt like pity. So he'd sabotaged everything. Late nights that became affairs, emotional distance that became cruelty, until she finally asked for the divorce. Afterward, he'd constructed an elaborate lie, telling anyone who'd listen that Abigail's age was the issue, her career obsession, her inability to prioritize family. He needed to protect his image, his reputation, his sense of manhood. "She humiliated me by leaving," Wesley said finally, his voice tight with manufactured conviction. But Marcus knew the truth. And soon, at a vineyard wedding with 400 guests and 15 million watching online, everyone else would too. The morning sun filtered through the bay windows of the brownstone in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood, casting warm light across the hardwood floors. Dr. Abigail Amara stood in her kitchen, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd mastered the art of controlled chaos. "Mommy, Gideon took my hairbrush." 5-year-old Cynthia's voice rang out from upstairs. "Did not," came the immediate response. "Cynthia, Gideon, 5 minutes until we leave for school," Abigail called, her voice firm but warm as she packed 3 lunchboxes with the precision of a surgical procedure. Turkey sandwich with the crusts cut off for Cynthia. Peanut butter and honey for Favor. Ham and cheese for Gideon, cut into triangles because he insisted rectangles tasted different. At 34, Abigail had learned to move through her mornings like a conductor leading an orchestra. White coat hanging by the door for her afternoon shift at Children's Hospital. Permission slips signed and tucked into backpacks. 3 water bottles filled and waiting. "Mommy, I can't find my other shoe." Favor appeared at the top of the stairs, one Mary Jane on, the other foot bare. "Check under your bed, sweetheart. You kicked it off last night during story time." Abigail glanced at her reflection in the hallway mirror as she passed. She'd inherited her mother's warm brown skin and high cheekbones, her father's intelligent eyes. She wore her natural hair in a graceful updo, professional yet authentically her. No pretense, no performance, just Abigail. The doorbell rang just as she was herding the triplets toward their shoes. "I've got it!" Lydia Chen's voice came through the door before she let herself in with her spare key. "Emergency coffee delivery and, oh no, I'm interrupting the morning rush." "You're never interrupting." Abigail smiled, accepting the still warm cup. "You're a lifesaver." Lydia, her best friend since medical school, taught literature at Boston University. She had the kind of presence that filled a room. Bold glasses, colorful scarves, and an ability to read people that rivaled any psychologist. "Auntie Lydia!" The triplets swarmed her like she was their favorite celebrity. "My favorite humans!" Lydia dispensed hugs and high fives with equal enthusiasm. "Now go find those shoes before your mom has to use her disappointed face." The children scrambled off, and Lydia's expression shifted. She pulled a cream-colored envelope from her bag, expensive cardstock, visible even from a distance. "This came to my place by mistake," she said carefully. "Forwarded from your old Atlanta address." Abigail's hands stilled on the lunchbox she'd been zipping closed. She didn't need to see the return address to know. She took the envelope, her fingers steady despite the sudden weight in her chest. The invitation inside was exactly what she'd expected. Embossed lettering. Gold foil. The kind of ostentatious elegance Wesley always favored. "Mr. Wesley Smith and Ms. Diana Barrett request the honor of your presence." But it was the handwritten note tucked inside that made her breath catch. "Back row. Far left. Where you belong." His handwriting. That same precise script he'd used to sign their divorce papers. Lydia watched her friend's face. "Abby, he actually wrote that," Abigail said softly, her voice remarkably even. A flicker of something, pain, anger, memory, crossed her features before she controlled it. "After everything, he still needs this." She set the invitation on the counter, smoothing the edges with fingers that only trembled slightly. "You don't have to go," Lydia said. "You don't owe him anything, especially not the satisfaction of—" "No," Abigail interrupted gently. "I don't owe him anything. But maybe I owe myself something." The memories came unbidden, unwanted. 5 years of marriage that had slowly suffocated her like water rising an inch at a time. Year 1. Wesley's charm still intact, but the late nights starting. "Building the business, babe, you understand." Year 2. The comments about her career. "Maybe if you weren't always at the hospital." Other wives make their husbands a priority. Year 3. The fertility appointments. Her sitting alone in waiting rooms while Wesley claimed he was too busy to join her. The tests that showed nothing wrong with her. Her gentle suggestion they test him too. His anger, his accusations. "You're trying to make this my fault?" Year 4. The whispers at his company events. The younger women he'd laughed too loudly with. His phone always face down. The smell of perfume that wasn't hers. Year 5. The final appointment. The one he'd refused to attend. The specialist's compassionate voice. "Dr. Amara, your results are excellent. If you're struggling to conceive, we really should test your husband as well." She'd gone home that evening prepared to have an honest conversation, to tell him it might not be her, that they could face this together. Instead, she'd found him in their bedroom, drunk, his phone open to messages she wasn't supposed to see. "You can't give me what I need," he'd said when she confronted him. "Not about the affair, about the fertility. Everyone knows it. You're too old, too focused on your career. I need a real family." She'd asked for a divorce that night, and within weeks, the rumors started spreading through his social circles, his business network, their former mutual friends. Abigail couldn't have children. Abigail chose her career over family. Abigail was too old, too selfish, too career-driven. He never mentioned his own test results, never admitted that the specialist had finally called with his analysis, the one Wesley had secretly done and then buried when the results showed the truth. "Mommy, we're ready!" Gideon appeared with his sisters, all three wearing their backpacks like tiny astronauts. Abigail blinked back to the present, her children's faces grounding her. Cynthia with her thoughtful eyes, Favor with her gap-toothed smile, Gideon with his serious expression that made him look like a tiny professor. After the divorce, she'd thrown herself into her work. 6 months later, she'd received a call about a fertility research program. Would she consider IVF with donor assistance? She'd done it quietly, privately, telling only Lydia and her immediate family. The triplets had been born 2 years after her divorce. 3 perfect miracles that Wesley would never know about until she decided he should. "Lydia, "Can you stay for a minute after I drop them off?" Abigail asked. 20 minutes later, after depositing 3 excited children at their Montessori school, Abigail returned to find Lydia making fresh coffee. "You're really going to do this," Lydia said. It wasn't a question. "I'm really going to do this." Abigail pulled out her phone. But not the way he planned. She scrolled through her contacts until she found a name she hadn't called in over a year. David Lawson. They'd worked together on a hospital donation project 2 years ago. His company had funded an entire pediatric wing. He'd been kind, intelligent, and refreshingly genuine. They'd stayed in touch professionally. She also knew, because she read industry news, that David had just been promoted. The new CEO of Smith & Lawson Holdings, Wesley's company, Wesley's new boss. Her finger hovered over the call button. "Abby, what are you thinking?" Lydia asked, reading her friend's expression. "I'm thinking," Abigail said slowly, "that Wesley invited me to watch him celebrate his new life. But maybe it's time he saw what I've built from the ashes of his lies." She pressed call. David answered on the second ring. "Dr. Amara, this is a pleasant surprise." "David, do you have a moment? I have an unusual request." That evening, after the children were bathed and tucked into their beds, Abigail sat in her living room with fabric swatches spread across the coffee table. Her tailor, Mrs. Okonkwo, a Nigerian woman who'd known her family for decades, smiled knowingly. "A wedding, you say? And you want gold kente?" "Gold kente for me," Abigail confirmed, "and formal wear for 3 very special guests." Mrs. Okonkwo's eyes twinkled. 2 little dresses and a tiny tuxedo? With pink sashes for the girls, and a bow tie that matches for Gideon. "And this wedding," Mrs. Okonkwo began carefully, "is being thrown by someone who forgot that dignity doesn't depend on where you're seated," Abigail finished. "It depends on who you are when you stand up." She thought of David's response during their phone call, his immediate understanding, his quiet anger on her behalf when she'd briefly explained, his confirmation that yes, he'd be in Atlanta that weekend, his offer to accompany her. "Sometimes the best revenge is living well," he'd said. She'd smiled into the phone. "Then let's live beautifully this weekend." Now, running her fingers over the gold fabric, Abigail felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not even vindication, just clarity. Wesley had wanted to humiliate her, to prove she was less than, to show 400 guests and millions of followers that she was nothing without him. Instead, she would show him, show everyone, exactly what she'd become. A mother, a doctor, a woman who'd rebuilt her life from his destruction and created something he could never touch. The back row seat was waiting. But Abigail Amara had other plans. Atlanta's Buckhead district glittered like a jewelry box in the evening light. From the rooftop terrace of Vercelli Vineyards, the city sprawled below in a carpet of lights and promise. Diana Barrett held her phone at the perfect angle, her smile practiced and luminous. "Hey, beautiful souls." Her voice had that breathy quality her followers loved. "Day 3 of wedding prep, and I'm literally dying over these floral arrangements. Look at this." She panned to reveal cascading orchids in shades of blush and cream, each bloom positioned with mathematical precision. The Vineyards event coordinator hovered nearby, tablet in hand, waiting for approval that wouldn't come easily. "Can we get more of the pale pink here?" Diana gestured vaguely. "And I think the lighting needs to be warmer. More golden hour vibes for the ceremony." "Of course, Ms. Barrett," the coordinator said, making notes with the weary patience of someone who'd heard 17 variations of the same request. Wesley stood 20 feet away, surveying his kingdom. He'd shed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves in that calculated way that suggested effortless confidence. Around him, vendors moved with the urgency of soldiers under command. "No, no, no." He strode toward the catering manager, his voice sharp. I specifically said the champagne wall should be visible from the entrance. How is anyone supposed to Instagram it if they can't see it when they walk in? Mr. Smith, the structural support for the garden archway. I don't care about structural limitations. I care about impact. Figure it out. The manager nodded tightly and retreated, already pulling out his phone to call in reinforcements. Marcus Cole watched from the pergola, nursing a scotch and wondering when his best friend had become this person. He'd known Wesley since college, back when they were just two ambitious kids with more dreams than sense. But this version of Wesley, this image-obsessed performance artist, felt like watching a stranger wear his friend's face. "Mr. Smith!" A young woman from the PR firm rushed over, her heels clicking on the stone terrace. "We've confirmed the photographer from Atlanta Style magazine. They want to do a feature on the couple's love story. Should I schedule it for tomorrow afternoon?" "Make it happen." Wesley didn't look at her. "And make sure they understand the angle. Successful entrepreneur, perfect wife, dream wedding. None of that invasive personal history nonsense." "Of course, sir." Diana floated over, still filming herself. "Babe, come here. My followers want to see the groom in action." She turned the camera to capture them both, her free hand sliding around his waist. "Look at this incredible man, making our dream day happen." Wesley's smile activated like a switch, warm, genuine-looking, completely manufactured. "Anything for you, sweetheart." "Goals!" Diana squealed to her phone. "Literally relationship goals. Drop a heart emoji if you believe in true love." The moment she turned away, Wesley's smile evaporated. "Wes, can we talk?" Marcus approached, keeping his voice low. "Kind of busy here, Marcus." "It'll just take a minute." It wasn't really a request. Wesley exhaled sharply, but followed his friend to a quieter corner of the terrace, away from the organized chaos of wedding preparation. "What's so urgent?" Marcus studied him carefully. "I've been thinking about what you said, about inviting Abigail to humiliate her." "And?" Wesley's tone went defensive. "And it's messed up, man. Even for you. She deserves it. Does she? Or is this about something else?" Marcus took a sip of his drink. "You've got Diana now. You've got this whole perfect life you're building. Why drag Abigail into it?" Wesley's jaw tightened. "Because she left me. She walked away like 5 years of marriage meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. You cheated on her, Wesley, multiple times." "I was dealing with—" He stopped himself, the words catching in his throat. "She gave up on us. She quit. She asked for a divorce after you treated her like she was disposable." Marcus's voice remained steady, factual. "That's not quitting. That's self-respect." Wesley turned away, gripping the terrace railing. Below, the vineyard's rows stretched into the twilight like perfectly ordered veins. Everything controlled. Everything managed. "This is closure, Marcus." "My style of closure." "Closure would be moving on. This is revenge." "Maybe I'm entitled to a little revenge." Marcus shook his head slowly. "You know what worries me? You're so focused on this performance, this image, that you've forgotten what's actually real." "Everything here is real." Wesley gestured to the venue, the flowers, the $1 million production happening around them. "This is my life. This is what success looks like." "If you say so, man." Marcus finished his scotch. "But I've known you long enough to see when you're trying to convince yourself more than anyone else." He left Wesley alone on the terrace, the words hanging in the air like smoke. An hour later, Wesley sat in the vineyard's business office, ostensibly reviewing final payments, but actually avoiding returning to the controlled chaos outside. His laptop was open to spreadsheets, but his eyes weren't really seeing them. A new email notification appeared. The sender made his stomach clench. Corporate HQ. Urgent. Board review required. He should open it. He knew he should open it. Instead, he archived it unread, just like he'd archived the previous 3 emails from the same sender over the past 2 weeks. His phone buzzed. A text from Diana. "Where are you? We need to approve the cake design." He typed back, "Handling business stuff. Be there in 10." But he didn't move. Instead, his fingers navigated to his photos, scrolling back through years of carefully curated images until he found the folder he should have deleted long ago. Abigail's face looked back at him from the screen. Not the Abigail he'd described to Diana, not the career-obsessed woman too old to give him what he wanted. This was the Abigail from their early years, laughing at something he'd said. Her natural beauty requiring none of Diana's filters or strategic angles, her eyes holding a warmth that had once been directed at him. He'd taken this photo at a medical charity gala, back when he'd been proud to stand beside her. Before the fertility appointments. Before the diagnosis that had shattered his ego. Before he'd convinced himself that if he couldn't have children, it must be her fault, not his. The lies had started small. A comment here, an implication there. We're struggling to conceive. Let people draw their own conclusions. Let them assume the 38-year-old woman was the problem, not the 35-year-old man who couldn't handle the truth about his own body. Those small lies had grown, fed by his insecurity and rage. Until they'd become the official narrative. Abigail couldn't have children. Abigail chose her career over family. Abigail was too old, too set in her ways, too unwilling to make him her priority. The truth, that he'd sabotaged their marriage because he couldn't face his own perceived inadequacy, remained buried under layers of performance and pretense. A sharp knock made him close the photo quickly, guiltily. "Mr. Smith?" His assistant Natalie appeared in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt, but you have several urgent matters that need attention." "Not now, Natalie." "Sir, it's about the quarterly reports. The board has requested—" "I said not now!" His voice came out sharper than intended. Natalie flinched slightly, but held her ground. She'd worked for Wesley long enough to recognize when he was in one of his moods. "Of course, sir. But I should mention that there's a memo from the incoming CEO regarding discrepancies in the—" "Forward it to my email. I'll deal with it after the wedding." "Mr. Smith, I really think you should—" "Natalie." His tone could have frozen water. "Unless Atlanta is literally on fire, it can wait until after Saturday." She left quietly, and Wesley returned to his phone, to Abigail's photo. 3 more days. 3 more days, and she'd walk into Vercelli Vineyards and see everything she'd given up. She'd sit in that back row and watch him marry a younger, more beautiful woman. She'd realize that leaving him had been the biggest mistake of her life. He zoomed in on her face in the photo, searching for something he couldn't quite name. "You'll wish you never left," he muttered to the empty office, his voice barely above a whisper. "You'll see what you threw away, and you'll finally understand." Later that night, long after Diana had gone to bed, Wesley sat alone in their penthouse. The city lights sparkled beyond the windows, but he barely noticed. His laptop was open, the archived emails from corporate HQ still sitting unread in his trash folder. He knew what they said, had known for weeks. The board had questions about the Q3 financials, about revenue projections that didn't quite match the underlying data, about contracts he'd reported as closed that were actually still in negotiation, about the optimistic picture he'd painted for investors that was starting to show cracks. Nothing criminal, just optimistic, creative accounting. The kind of thing successful people did to maintain momentum, to keep the success story rolling. The kind of thing that could get him fired if the new CEO decided to make an example of him. David Lawson. Some Boston transplant the board had brought in to modernize operations. Wesley had never even met the man, but he already resented him. Resented his reputation for ethical leadership and transparency. Resented the way everyone spoke about him like he was some kind of corporate savior. Wesley pulled up Lawson's bio on the company website. Distinguished career. Harvard MBA. Known for turning around struggling divisions through integrity and innovation. The kind of leader who probably color-coded his moral compass. After Saturday, Wesley said to the empty room, after everyone sees what I've built, what I have, none of this will matter. He closed the laptop without reading the emails. On his phone, Abigail's photo still glowed in the darkness. He stared at it for a long moment before finally, reluctantly, turning off the screen. But even in the darkness, he could still see her face. Still hear her voice from that last night. I deserve better than this, better than you. 3 more days, and he'd prove her wrong. 3 more days, and everyone would see that Wesley Smith always won in the end. The city glittered below, oblivious to the careful house of cards he'd built, the lies he'd constructed, the truth waiting in the wings like a patient executioner. But Wesley didn't see any of that. He only saw Saturday, only saw his triumph. Everything else was just noise. The Saturday morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Bella Bambini, Boston's premier children's boutique. Abigail stood before a 3-way mirror, watching her daughters twirl in matching white dresses with delicate lace overlays. Mommy, look, I'm a princess. Favor spun until her skirt billowed like a flower. Me too. Cynthia mimicked her sister, though her spin was more measured, calculated. Always the thoughtful one. You're both beautiful, Abigail said softly, kneeling to adjust Cynthia's hem. Her fingers moved gently, smoothing the fabric. But remember, it's not the dress that makes you special. It's what's in here. Gideon tapped his chest seriously, repeating what his mother had told them countless times. He stood nearby in his miniature tuxedo, looking like a tiny professor about to defend his dissertation. The boutique owner, Mrs. Chen, no relation to Lydia, despite the shared surname, approached with an armful of pink sashes. These will complement the dresses perfectly, Dr. Amara, and I have bow ties that match for your handsome young man. Can mine be hot pink? Favor asked, bouncing on her toes. I want light pink, Cynthia said immediately, establishing her difference. And you, Mr. Gideon? Mrs. Chen asked with mock formality. Whatever matches my sisters, he said seriously. We're a team. Abigail felt her heart contract with love so fierce it almost hurt. These 3 miracles, created from her determination and hope after Wesley had tried to convince the world, and her, that she was incapable of motherhood. A team, she repeated, running her hand over Gideon's carefully combed hair. Yes, you are. Mrs. Chen helped the girls into their sashes, tying perfect bows at the back. In the mirror, Abigail saw not just her children, but a promise fulfilled. A life rebuilt from ashes. A future Wesley had no part in, but would soon have to witness. Mommy, why are we getting so fancy? Cynthia asked, her perceptive eyes studying her mother's face. Because sometimes we need to dress up to remind ourselves of our own worth, Abigail answered honestly. And because we're going to an important event where I need my 3 favorite people by my side. Like backup? Gideon asked. Abigail smiled. Exactly like backup. 700 miles south, Wesley stood in his climate-controlled walk-in closet, holding 2 pairs of cufflinks up to the light. One set was platinum with subtle diamond accents. Elegant, understated. The other was gold with his initials prominently engraved. Bold, unmissable. What do you think? He called to Diana, who was filming herself getting a pre-wedding facial in their bathroom. Whatever you want, babe, she called back, her voice muffled by a clay mask. You look amazing in everything. Wesley chose the gold ones, the ones that would catch the light in every photograph, the ones that screamed success. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. We still on for the bachelor thing tonight? Wesley typed back, yeah, keep it low-key. Can't have any social media disasters before Saturday. Another message appeared, this one from his attorney. Need to discuss the board inquiry. Available Monday? He deleted it without responding. Diana appeared in the doorway, her face freshly washed and glowing. I just got the final head count from Vanessa. 412 confirmed guests. Can you believe it? Over 400 people coming to celebrate us. That's incredible. Sweetheart. Wesley slipped the cufflinks into their velvet box. Speaking of which, I closed that development deal in Midtown, the Peachtree Plaza project. Diana's eyes widened. The one worth 8 figures? Babe, that's amazing. When did this happen? Papers were signed yesterday. Wesley lied smoothly. The truth was more complicated. The deal was still in preliminary negotiations, and the board had questions about his revenue projections. But it would close. It had to close. And by the time anyone realized the timeline didn't quite match his claims, Saturday would be over, and his image would be cemented. We should celebrate. Diana threw her arms around his neck. My successful, brilliant husband-to-be. Wesley held her, but his mind was already elsewhere, calculating angles and managing narratives. Every piece had to be perfect. Every detail had to align. Diana's phone chimed with another notification. Oh, the videographer wants to do a behind-the-scenes thing. Just candid shots of us preparing. Very authentic and intimate. Sounds perfect, Wesley said, knowing that nothing about this wedding was authentic or intimate. It was a production, a performance, a carefully constructed illusion. But that's what success looked like in the age of Instagram, and Wesley Smith knew how to sell success better than anyone. At Children's Hospital Boston, Abigail finished her afternoon rounds, checking in on her young patients with the same gentle attention she gave her own children. She was reviewing discharge notes when her receptionist buzzed. Dr. Amara, you have a visitor, a Mr. David Lawson? Abigail felt a flutter of something, anticipation, nervousness. She couldn't quite name it. Send him back, please. David Lawson appeared moments later, and Abigail was reminded why she'd always found him easy to talk to. He was tall without being imposing, well-dressed without being ostentatious. His smile reached his eyes in a way Wesley's never had. Dr. Amara, he said, extending his hand. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. I was just finishing up. She shook his hand, noting the firm but not aggressive grip. You didn't have to come all this way. You could have just sent the documents. I wanted to see you before Saturday, David said honestly. He held up a manila envelope. Travel itinerary, hotel confirmation, and the updated guest list showing your seating arrangement. Abigail took the envelope, noting the weight of it. Updated seating arrangement? Front row, center left. Next to me. David's expression was carefully neutral. I thought you might appreciate a better view than what was originally planned. Abigail felt something warm unfold in her chest. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. Someone seeing her. Someone choosing to stand beside her. That's very kind of you. It's strategic, David corrected gently. I have some business to conduct at this wedding. Having you there as my guest serves both our purposes. They moved to her small office, and David took the chair across from her desk. Outside the window, Boston stretched out in the afternoon light, solid and real in a way Atlanta's glitter never had been. Can I ask you something? David leaned forward slightly. And please, feel free to tell me it's none of my business. Go ahead. Why are you really doing this? You could ignore the invitation, move on with your life. You've clearly built something remarkable here. He gestured to the diplomas on her wall, the photos of her children on her desk. Why walk back into his trap? Abigail was quiet for a moment, considering. Because for 3 years, I've let him control the narrative. He told everyone I was too old, too career-focused, too incapable of giving him a family. He made me the villain in his story. And now? Now I have 3 children who prove his lies, and a life that doesn't need his validation. She met David's eyes steadily. I'm not walking into his trap. I'm walking in to close a door he left open. David nodded slowly. And after Saturday? After Saturday, I never think about Wesley Smith again. Good. David stood preparing to leave. Because honestly, from what I've learned about him in the past 3 weeks of reviewing company files, you're better off without him in every possible way. Abigail walked him to the elevator. As they waited, David said quietly, I meant what I told you on the phone. Sometimes the best revenge is living well. Abigail looked at him. This man who'd agreed to help her, who'd rearranged his schedule, who was willing to stand beside her in front of 400 strangers without asking for anything in return. Then let's live beautifully this weekend, she said. The elevator arrived, and David stepped inside. Just before the doors closed, he added, For what it's worth, Dr. Amara, I think your ex-husband is about to realize he made the biggest mistake of his life. He made that mistake 3 years ago, Abigail replied. Saturday is just when he finally understands it. That evening, Abigail stood in her bedroom, the gold kente cloth draped across her bed. Mrs. Okonkwo had outdone herself. The fabric seemed to capture light and hold it, transforming it into something regal and powerful. Lydia sat on the edge of the bed, watching her friend. You're really doing this. I'm really doing this. And David Lawson is flying to Atlanta specifically to escort you? He has business there anyway, Abigail said, but she couldn't quite hide her smile. Business. Right. Lydia grinned. Girl, he drove across town to hand-deliver papers he could have emailed. That man is interested. He's being a friend. He's being a man who recognizes an extraordinary woman when he sees one. Lydia stood, hugging her friend. Wesley is going to lose his mind when he sees you. Abigail thought about that. About Wesley's carefully planned humiliation, about his back row seating, about his need to prove she'd made a mistake by leaving him. Let him, she said softly. I stopped caring what Wesley Smith thinks a long time ago. Saturday isn't about him. It's about me finally closing that chapter for good. She ran her fingers over the gold fabric, feeling its weight and quality. In 3 days, she would walk into Vercelli Vineyards, not as Wesley's discarded ex-wife, but as Dr. Abigail Amara, mother, physician, woman who'd rebuilt her entire life from the wreckage of his lies. And this time, she wouldn't be sitting in the back row. The morning sun cast Vercelli Vineyards in golden light, transforming the sprawling estate into something from a fairy tale. Or a carefully curated Instagram post, which, for most of the arriving guests, amounted to the same thing. By 9 a.m., the circular drive was already clogged with luxury vehicles. Valets in crisp white shirts rushed between Teslas and Mercedes, while guests emerged in designer labels and rehearsed smiles. Above, 3 drones hovered like mechanical birds, capturing aerial footage for the live stream. Hadge Smith Barrett wedding is already trending, a lifestyle influencer squealed to her phone, angling for the perfect shot of the floral archway. You guys, this is literally the most beautiful venue I've ever seen. Near the entrance, a photographer from Atlanta Style magazine directed a fashion blogger. Give me more candid. Like you just happened to look fabulous while casually attending the wedding of the year. Inside the vineyard's main building, Vanessa Morgan coordinated chaos with military precision. Her headset crackled with constant updates. Table 7 needs adjustment. The champagne wall lighting isn't right. Someone check on the string quartet. Wesley stood near the groom's suite, greeting early arrivals with practiced charm. He'd been awake since 5, running through mental checklists, ensuring every detail aligned. His custom Tom Ford tuxedo fit perfectly. He'd lost 5 pounds specifically for this day. His hair was styled with just enough product to look effortless. His smile was camera-ready. Wesley, congratulations, man! A business associate pumped his hand enthusiastically. This place is incredible. You really outdid yourself. Only the best, Wesley replied smoothly, already scanning the crowd for the next important person to acknowledge. Marcus appeared at his elbow, looking uncomfortable in his morning coat. Pretty impressive turnout. 412 confirmed guests, 6 major publications, estimated social media reach of 20 million. Wesley's voice held satisfaction. Everything is perfect. Is it? Marcus kept his voice low. You seem more focused on the numbers than the actual marriage. The marriage will be perfect too, Wesley said dismissively. Diana knows how to play her part. Marcus studied his friend's face. Is that what this is? Everyone playing parts? Before Wesley could respond, Vanessa's voice crackled through the venue speakers. All guests, the ceremony begins in 1 hour. Please begin making your way to the garden seating area. The crowd began flowing toward the vineyard's heart, a manicured garden with rows of white chairs facing an elaborate floral altar. The Chattahoochee River Valley stretched beyond, providing a backdrop that had been described by one blogger as literally heaven on earth. Wesley checked his watch. 11 o'clock ceremony. Abigail's invitation had specified 10:45 arrival, ensuring she'd have to navigate through the already seated crowd to reach her back row position. Maximum visibility, maximum humiliation. He allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. At 10:53, a strange hush fell over the arriving guests. It started subtly, a few heads turning toward the main drive. Then more. Conversations trailing off mid-sentence. The distinctive, impossible to mistake purr of an engine that cost more than most people's houses. A silver Rolls Royce Phantom glided up the circular drive like a shark through still water. Is that? Someone started. Oh my God, an influencer whispered, already raising her phone. The car stopped at the main entrance, not the service road where late arrivals and vendors had been directed. Not the side entrance Wesley had specifically noted on Abigail's invitation. The main entrance, where only VIP guests and the wedding party had been authorized to arrive. A chauffeur in full livery emerged and walked around the vehicle with ceremonial precision. He opened the rear passenger door. Time seemed to slow. Out stepped a woman who commanded attention without demanding it. Dr. Abigail Amara rose from the car in a cascade of gold kente cloth that caught the morning light and transformed it into something almost celestial. The traditional West African fabric had been tailored into a modern silhouette, regal, elegant, unapologetically bold. Her natural hair was styled in an intricate updo adorned with gold accessories. Her makeup was subtle but flawless, emphasizing her warm brown skin and intelligent eyes. She wore no excessive jewelry. She didn't need to. She was the statement. But it was what happened next that turned whispers into gasps. 3 children emerged from the car, each one holding her hand or gown. 2 girls in pristine white dresses with pink sashes, their hair styled in matching puffs. A boy in a miniature tuxedo with a bow tie that perfectly complemented his sister's sashes. They couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Identical faces, triplets. Are those? Someone started. They look just like... Then David Lawson stepped out of the car. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that whispered rather than shouted wealth. His presence carried the quiet authority of someone who'd earned his position rather than inherited it. He offered his arm to Abigail with the easy familiarity of an equal, not a supplicant. The whispers became a roar. Isn't that Wesley's ex-wife? She has children? I thought, wait, that man. Isn't he the new CEO? David Lawson, from the corporate office. The one who's taking over the Atlanta division? Phones rose like a field of flowers turning toward the sun. Camera shutters clicked. Videos began recording. The #Smith-Barrett wedding was about to get a lot more interesting. Wesley stood near the garden entrance, greeting guests as they found their seats. He was mid-laugh at someone's joke when he saw the crowd's attention shift. Saw heads turning. Heard the change in the venue's energy. He turned. The smile died on his face. Abigail walked toward the garden with her children flanking her like small, dignified guards. David Lawson walked beside her, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back in a gesture that was both protective and proprietary. Wesley's mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Abigail wasn't supposed to look like that. Glowing, confident, surrounded by children that couldn't exist because everyone knew she couldn't have children because he'd told them, the triplets. His thoughts fractured. The boy looked to be about 5, which meant Vanessa rushed over, her tablet clutched to her chest, her professional composure cracking. "Mr. Smith, she's on the guest list, but there's some confusion about—" "What is she doing here?" Wesley's voice came out strangled. "She's on the guest list, sir." Vanessa scrolled frantically through her tablet. Dr. Abigail Amara, plus guests, front row seating, section B, seats 1 through 4, by Mr. Lawson's request. Front row? Wesley's voice rose. "I specifically put her in the back, last row. I wrote it myself." "Yes, sir. But there was an update from corporate. Mr. Lawson is representing the board at the ceremony, and he requested adjacent seating for his party." Vanessa's finger shook slightly as she pointed to the notation. It came through official channels. "I couldn't exactly refuse the incoming CEO." Wesley watched as Abigail and her impossible children were escorted to the front row. Watched as David Lawson, his new boss, the man who held his professional future in his hands, helped settle the children into their seats with easy competence. Watched as 400 guests and countless phones captured every moment. "Wesley?" Marcus had appeared beside him. "What's going on?" "She has children," Wesley whispered. "She has 3 children." "Yeah, man, I can see that." "But she was supposed to—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't voice the lie he'd built his entire post-divorce narrative on. In the front row, little Gideon looked around with wide eyes while his sisters sat with surprising composure. Abigail leaned down to whisper something to them. And all 3 nodded seriously. Then Abigail lifted her gaze and looked directly at Wesley. Her expression wasn't triumphant, wasn't smug. It was simply calm. The look of someone who'd already moved on, who'd already won by virtue of living well. Wesley felt something crack inside his chest. In the bridal suite, Diana Barrett sat before a Hollywood-style mirror while 3 makeup artists worked on her already perfect face. Around her, bridesmaids in blush pink gowns sipped mimosas and scrolled through their phones. "Oh my God!" One of them, Stephanie, Diana's college roommate, suddenly gasped. "What?" Diana kept her face still as lipstick was applied. "The hashtag just exploded. There's something happening outside." Another bridesmaid crowded around Stephanie's phone. "Is that a Rolls Royce?" "Who arrives at someone else's wedding in a Rolls Royce?" a third asked. Diana's eyes flicked to the mirror's reflection, where she could see the phones being passed around. "What are you guys talking about?" "Wesley's ex-wife just showed up," Stephanie said slowly, scrolling through videos. "With triplets. And some really hot guy in a suit." Diana's hand, reaching for her mimosa, froze midair. "His ex-wife?" Her voice remained carefully neutral. "I didn't know she was invited." "Girl, she wasn't just invited. She rolled up like she owns the place." Stephanie turned her phone around, showing a video already viewed 50,000 times. "And the comments are saying that guy with her is Wesley's new boss?" Diana watched the video play. Watched a woman she'd never met step out of a car that cost more than Diana's entire influencer setup. Watched 3 beautiful children emerge like something from a fairy tale. Watched a man who radiated quiet power offer his arm to this woman with obvious respect. "The comments say Wesley told everyone she couldn't have kids," another bridesmaid read aloud. "But obviously—" Diana's perfectly made-up face remained immobile, but something cold settled in her stomach. Wesley had said his ex-wife was too old, too career-focused, unable to give him the family he wanted. That's why their marriage failed. That's what he'd told her. But that woman in the video, that woman with 3 children and a powerful man by her side, that woman didn't look like someone who'd failed at anything. "Diana? You okay?" Stephanie asked. "Fine," Diana said automatically, reaching for her mimosa with a hand that trembled slightly. "Just wedding day nerves." But through the suite's window, she could hear the growing buzz of voices outside, could feel the shift in the day's energy, could sense that something was happening that had nothing to do with her carefully planned, perfectly curated wedding. And for the first time since Wesley had proposed, Diana Barrett wondered if she really knew the man she was about to marry. Outside, Abigail settled into her front row seat with her children around her and smiled. The string quartet began playing Pachelbel's Canon in D, the traditional processional that had been featured in 1,000 weddings and twice as many Instagram reels. The guests rose in a choreographed wave, turning toward the garden path where Diana's bridesmaids would soon appear. Wesley stood at the altar, Marcus beside him, trying to project the confidence of a man in complete control. But his eyes kept drifting to the front row. To Abigail, serene in her gold kente cloth. To the 3 children who shouldn't exist. To David Lawson, who sat with the relaxed posture of someone holding all the cards. "Breathe," Marcus whispered. "You look like you're about to pass out." Wesley forced his shoulders back, his chin up. Smile. Project Confidence. 400 guests, 6 photographers, millions watching on social media. This was his moment, his triumph. So why did it feel like standing on a stage with the curtain already falling? The bridesmaids processed down the aisle in perfect formation, their blush-pink dresses catching the late morning light. Then came Diana's maid of honor. Then the flower girl, throwing petals with practiced precision. Finally, Diana appeared. She looked ethereal in her custom Vera Wang gown, a masterpiece of lace and silk that had taken 8 months and countless fittings to perfect. Her veil trailed behind her like a cloud. Her smile was radiant, camera-ready, the culmination of 1,000 rehearsals in front of her ring light. The guests sighed collectively. Phones rose. Camera shutters clicked like mechanical applause. But Wesley noticed something else. He noticed how many of those cameras swung between Diana and Abigail. How many lenses found the front row, capturing the elegant woman in gold with her impossible children. How many whispers spread through the crowd like ripples on water. Diana reached the altar, and her father, a successful tech entrepreneur who'd flown in from Silicon Valley, placed her hand in Wesley's. His grip was firm, his eyes carrying a warning Wesley couldn't quite read. The officiant, a professional ceremony speaker who'd done over 300 weddings, began with practiced warmth. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the presence of family and friends to witness the union of Wesley and Diana." Wesley tried to focus on the words, but his mind kept fragmenting. 3 children. She has 3 children. 5 years old, maybe. Which means 2 years after the divorce. Which means she could have children. Which means everyone will know I lied. Which means... Wesley? The officiant was looking at him expectantly. "Sorry, yes, I'm here." A titter of laughter from the crowd. Someone muttered, "Groom's nerves." But in the front row, Abigail's expression remained neutral. Gideon sat between his sisters, his small hands folded in his lap, watching the ceremony with serious eyes. Favor fidgeted slightly with her pink sash. Cynthia sat perfectly still, absorbing everything. David Lawson's phone buzzed silently. He glanced at it discreetly, his expression unchanging, then slipped it back into his jacket pocket. The ceremony continued. Readings about love and commitment. A unity candle lighting that Diana had insisted would photograph beautifully. A sand ceremony representing the blending of 2 lives. Wesley went through the motions, hitting his marks, saying his lines. But he could feel the day slipping away from his control. Could sense the narrative shifting beneath his feet like sand in a tide. "And now," the officiant said with rehearsed gravitas, "Wesley has prepared personal vows." Wesley pulled a folded card from his jacket pocket. He'd written these vows 2 weeks ago, workshopped them with Diana's publicist to ensure they struck the right tone. Romantic, but not maudlin. Specific, but not overly personal. Quotable for the future articles. "Diana," he began, his voice amplified by the discreet microphone clipped to his lapel. "From the moment I met you, I knew you were everything I'd been searching for. You represent the future I've always wanted. A partner who understands success, who values excellence, who—" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Wesley's eyes darted up from his card. 2 journalists were whispering, one showing something on her phone to the other. 3 rows back, someone was taking photos not of the altar, but of Abigail. Near the back, an influencer was typing furiously, her caption probably already going viral. "Who makes me want to be better?" Wesley continued, his voice less steady now. "You've given me a vision of the life I deserve, the family I've always wanted, the happiness that— Mommy, is that the man who lied about you?" Gideon's voice pitched to carry the innocent clarity of a 5-year-old who didn't understand whispers. The entire garden went silent. Every head turned to the front row. Abigail leaned down quickly, whispering something to her son. Gideon nodded solemnly and fell quiet, but the damage was done. The whispers erupted like a disturbed beehive. "What did that child say?" "Did you hear that?" "He said lied." "Whose kids are those?" "I heard he told everyone his ex-wife couldn't have children." Wesley's hands clenched around his vow card, crumpling it. His carefully prepared words suddenly felt hollow, meaningless. Every camera in the venue was now trained on him, capturing his discomfort in high definition. Diana's eyes were wide behind her veil, her smile frozen in place. She leaned slightly toward Wesley without moving her lips. "What is going on?" "Nothing," Wesley whispered back. "Just keep going." But Diana had been managing her image long enough to recognize when a narrative was spiraling out of control. She could see the journalists' expressions, could hear the murmuring, could sense the exact moment when her perfect wedding became someone else's story. The officiant, a professional to his core, attempted to recover. "Beautiful words, Wesley. And now, Diana has prepared her vows." Diana pulled out her own card, but her hands weren't quite steady. She'd rehearsed these vows 50 times in front of her mirror, perfecting the cadence, the pauses, the moments where her voice would catch with emotion. But now, standing at an altar while 400 guests whispered about her groom's ex-wife and mysterious children, the words felt like they belonged to a different wedding, a different story. "Wesley," she began, "you showed me what it means to dream big, to never settle, to always reach for more." Her voice trailed off as she noticed something over Wesley's shoulder. David Lawson had stepped away from his seat, moving toward the garden's edge with his phone pressed to his ear. His expression was serious, professional. He spoke quietly for perhaps 30 seconds, then nodded once and ended the call. He didn't return to his seat. Instead, he stood at the edge of the gathering, waiting. Diana's influencer instincts, the ones that had built her empire, screamed that something was wrong. Very wrong. "Wesley," she whispered, abandoning her vows. "Who is that man?" Wesley followed her gaze to David Lawson. His face went pale. That's my new boss, the incoming CEO." "Your boss?" Diana's voice rose slightly. "Your boss is here with your ex-wife?" "I didn't know." Wesley started. "Why didn't you tell me?" Diana hissed, her perfect composure cracking. "Why didn't you tell me she had children? Why didn't you tell me your new boss was attending? What else haven't you told me?" The officiant cleared his throat awkwardly. "Perhaps we should— continue?" But Wesley wasn't listening. His inner monologue had spiraled into full panic. "David Lawson is here. With Abigail. With the children that prove I lied. Everyone knows. They all know. The photographers know. The journalists know. Millions of people watching online will know. My business partners know. My clients know. The board. Oh God. The board. His eyes found Abigail's across the space between them. She wasn't smiling, wasn't gloating. She simply looked at him with an expression of such calm dignity that it felt like being held up to a mirror and seeing every flaw, every lie, every cruelty reflected back. She didn't need to say anything. Her presence said it all. I moved on. I built a life. I have everything you claimed I couldn't have, and I did it without you. Wesley's hands began to tremble. Small tremors that grew until his whole body felt like it might shake apart. Marcus noticed. Wes? Man, are you okay? Diana noticed too. Wesley, what's wrong? You're shaking. I'm fine, he said automatically, but his voice sounded distant even to his own ears. The officiant gamely pressed forward. If there are no objections, we'll proceed to the exchange of rings. Actually, a voice cut through the garden, calm and authoritative, there is something that needs to be addressed. David Lawson stepped forward from the edge of the gathering. Every camera in the venue swung toward him. The live stream's viewer count skyrocketed. Wesley's trembling intensified. Marcus gripped his arm. Diana took a step back, her train rustling against the flower petals. I apologize for the interruption, David continued, his voice carrying easily across the silent garden. But I have urgent corporate business that cannot wait. He locked eyes with Wesley, and in that moment, Wesley knew. He knew his carefully constructed house of cards was about to collapse. He knew that all his lies, about Abigail, about the financials, about his success, were about to be exposed in front of everyone who mattered. He knew that this wedding, this perfect day, this carefully curated image, was over. Diana's hand found his, squeezing hard. Not in support, but in demand. Her whisper was sharp, urgent, terrified. Wesley, what did you do? But Wesley couldn't answer, could only stand there, trembling, as his new boss approached the altar and 400 guests held their collective breath, waiting for the truth to finally, inevitably, arrive. In the front row, Abigail gathered her children closer, their small, warm bodies pressing against her. She'd known this moment was coming, had prepared for it. But unlike Wesley, she'd prepared by building something real, something true. And now, under the perfect Atlanta sun, in front of millions watching, the difference between image and substance was about to become crystal clear. David Lawson stood at the edge of the altar area, his presence commanding attention without demanding it. The string quartet's music had died away. 400 guests sat frozen, phones raised, capturing every second. Ladies and gentlemen, David's voice carried across the garden with the authority of someone accustomed to boardrooms and difficult conversations. I apologize for this disruption. However, I have urgent corporate business that requires immediate attention. And given the public nature of this event, transparency seems appropriate. Wesley's legs felt like water. Marcus still gripped his arm, the only thing keeping him upright. Diana had taken 2 steps back, her train pooling around her feet like spilled milk. Mr. Smith, David addressed him directly, professionally, as though they were in a conference room instead of at an altar. I'm here in my capacity as incoming CEO of Smith & Lawson Holdings. The board has completed its review of the quarterly financial reports submitted under your signature. The garden was so quiet that the rustle of leaves sounded like thunder. The review revealed significant irregularities, revenue projections that don't match underlying data, contracts reported as closed that remain in negotiation, expenses misallocated to inflate performance metrics. David's tone remained even, factual. In short, systematic misrepresentation designed to present a false picture of both divisional and personal performance. That's not, Wesley started, his voice cracking. There's been a mistake. Those reports were signed by you, David continued. Submitted by you. The forensic accounting is conclusive. A journalist in the third row was typing so fast her fingers blurred. An influencer near the back had her phone held high, her eyes wide with the realization that she was witnessing the story of the year. The hashtag #SmithBarrettWedding was about to trend for entirely different reasons than anyone had planned. Effective immediately, David said, pulling a folded document from his jacket pocket. Your employment with Smith & Lawson Holdings is terminated. This termination is for cause, meaning forfeiture of severance, stock options, and deferred compensation. The board will be referring the matter to the SEC for potential fraud charges. The gasps rippled through the crowd like a physical wave. Wesley's face had gone from pale to gray. You can't. This is my wedding. You can't do this here. You ignored 3 formal requests to meet with me this week, David replied calmly. You archived emails from corporate counsel without reading them. You were unreachable through proper channels. So yes, Mr. Smith, I can do this here. Consider it a public service. These 400 guests are about to enter business relationships with you. They deserve to know the truth about who they're dealing with. Diana made a sound, half gasp, half sob. Her hands flew to her mouth, smudging her perfect lipstick. Wesley? What is he talking about? What fraud? It's a misunderstanding, Wesley said desperately, turning to her. The accounting was complex. There were legitimate differences in interpretation. There were lies, David corrected. Systematic, deliberate lies designed to inflate your professional standing and personal wealth. Marcus released Wesley's arm and stepped back, his expression a mixture of pity and vindication. He'd warned him. He'd tried. The photographers were in a frenzy now, capturing every angle. The wedding videographer had abandoned his carefully planned shots and was simply recording the unfolding disaster. The drone operators overhead adjusted their positions, ensuring they missed nothing. Wesley looked out at the crowd, at business partners, clients, colleagues, friends, and saw his reputation dissolving in real time. Saw phones recording his humiliation. Saw the exact moment when his carefully constructed image shattered beyond repair. This is, he started, but his voice failed him. Then Abigail stood. The movement was graceful, unhurried. She rose from her front row seat, like a queen rising from a throne, her gold kente cloth catching the sunlight. Her 3 children looked up at her with trusting eyes. The garden's attention shifted to her like iron to a magnet. Fraud wasn't the only lie Wesley built his life on, she said, her voice clear and steady. Not loud, but carrying perfectly in the shocked silence. Abigail, don't... Wesley's voice was desperate now. But Abigail wasn't asking for permission. She turned to face the crowd, 400 pairs of eyes locked on her. 3 years ago, when our marriage ended, Wesley told everyone who would listen that I was the problem, that I was too old to have children, too focused on my career, too selfish to give him the family he wanted. Her hand rested lightly on Cynthia's shoulder. The little girl looked up at her mother with absolute trust. He built an entire narrative around my supposed inadequacy. He told colleagues, clients, friends. He made sure everyone knew that our marriage failed because I couldn't give him what he needed. Wesley tried to speak, but no words came out. But the truth, Abigail continued, her voice gaining strength, is that I was never the one who couldn't have children. The fertility specialist's report was clear. The problem was never mine. Gasps rippled through the crowd again, louder now, accompanied by whispers that grew into a roar. He couldn't accept that, Abigail said. Couldn't accept that his own body had limitations. So he lied. He cheated. He pushed me away. And when I finally had the self-respect to ask for a divorce, he made me the villain in his story. Diana's hands dropped from her mouth. She was staring at Wesley with dawning horror. You told me she couldn't have children. You said... Yet here stand my 3 blessings. Abigail gestured to her children. Born 2 years after our divorce. Born from my decision to build a life based on truth instead of image. Born from my refusal to let his lies define me. Cynthia and Favor pressed closer to their mother, sensing the weight of the moment, even if they didn't fully understand it. Gideon looked up at Abigail, then across to Wesley at the altar. "Mommy," his young voice carried in the silence, innocent and devastating. "Is that the man who lied about you?" The question hung in the air like a bell that couldn't be unrung. "Yes, sweetheart," Abigail said softly, her hand stroking his hair. "That's the man who lied about me. But the truth is stronger than lies. Always remember that." Gideon nodded solemnly, then looked at Wesley with the unfiltered judgment only a child could deliver. "That's not nice. You should say sorry." Under different circumstances, it might have been funny. A 5-year-old demanding an apology from a grown man at his own wedding. But in this moment, with 400 witnesses and millions watching online, it was devastating. Wesley's legs gave out. He collapsed into the nearest chair, one of the decorative seats meant for the ceremony readers, his head in his hands. Diana stood frozen in her Vera Wang gown, her perfect day disintegrating around her. Tears streamed down her face, tracking through her makeup. "You lied to me," she whispered. "About everything. Your ex-wife, the children, your job. What else? What else did you lie about?" Marcus moved to steady her, but she shook him off. "Did you know?" she demanded of him. "Some of it," Marcus admitted quietly. "Not all, but enough that I tried to warn him." Diana looked at Wesley, really looked at him, and saw not the successful, confident man she'd agreed to marry, but someone small and broken, someone who'd built an entire life on deception. The journalists were writing frantically. The influencers were recording everything. The guests were whispering, sharing what they knew, piecing together the truth in real time. "The invitations," someone near the back said. He invited his ex-wife to humiliate her. But she showed up with the CEO. And 3 children that prove he lied. Oh my God, the karma of this. Vanessa, the wedding planner, stood paralyzed near the garden entrance, her tablet hanging forgotten in her hand. She'd coordinated hundreds of weddings, but she'd never seen one implode quite like this. Abigail remained standing, her children clustered around her like small anchors. She wasn't smiling, wasn't celebrating. She simply looked at Wesley with an expression that was somehow worse than anger, pity mixed with finality. "I didn't come here for revenge," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I came here for closure. To close a door that you left open with your lies. To stand in front of you and everyone you wanted to impress and show them the truth you tried so hard to bury." She gathered her children closer. "I came here to prove that dignity doesn't depend on someone else's validation. That truth is more powerful than image. And that the life you told everyone I couldn't have, I built it without you." Wesley lifted his head, his eyes red, his face twisted with emotions he couldn't control. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "Abigail, I don't need your apology," she said simply. "I stopped needing anything from you 3 years ago." She nodded to David, who moved to join her. Together, they began walking back down the aisle, Abigail in her gold kente cloth, David in his tailored suit, 3 children between them forming an unbreakable unit. The guests parted before them like water before a ship. As they passed, Wesley heard the whispers. "Can you believe he tried to humiliate her? She looks like a queen. Those children are beautiful. He destroyed his whole life for this?" Diana stood alone at the altar in her $1,000,000 gown, watching her groom sit broken in a chair, watching 400 guests document the collapse of everything they'd built. "The wedding," she whispered to no one in particular. "What about the wedding?" But there was no wedding. There was only truth, finally spoken, and the wreckage of lies finally exposed. And as Abigail walked out of Vercelli Vineyards with her children and David Lawson beside her, Wesley Smith, sat surrounded by the ruins of his carefully constructed life, understanding too late that you cannot build happiness on someone else's pain. The cameras captured it all. The garden erupted into chaos the moment Abigail and David disappeared from view. 400 guests abandoned any pretense of decorum, their phones held high like torches in the darkness, capturing every angle of the disaster. "Did you get that?" "I got everything." "This is insane. Are you streaming?" "Truth at the altar is already trending." The wedding photographer stood frozen, his expensive camera hanging forgotten around his neck. His assistant tugged his sleeve. "Should we pack up?" "Are you kidding?" He lifted his camera. "This is the story of the year. Keep shooting." Near the altar, Diana stood like a statue in her Vera Wang gown, her veil askew, her makeup streaked with tears. Around her, the carefully arranged flowers seemed to mock the collapse of her perfect day. The unity candle sat unlit. The sand ceremony remained incomplete, two separate vessels that would never blend. Marcus approached cautiously. "Diana, I'm sorry. If you need anything—" She held up a hand, stopping him. Her eyes were locked on Wesley, who still sat slumped in the decorative chair, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. "How long have you known?" Her voice was eerily calm. "Known what?" "That he's a liar. That everything he told me was fabricated." Diana's hands moved to her veil, unpinning it with mechanical precision. "That I was about to marry a man who built his entire life on deception." Marcus hesitated. "I knew some things. Not everything. I tried to warn him, but he didn't listen." Diana pulled the veil free, and with it came some of her hairpins. Her elaborate updo began to unravel. Because he never listens to anything that contradicts the image he wants to project. She looked at her bouquet, $2,000 worth of roses and orchids, flown in from Ecuador that morning. With a sudden movement, she threw it to the ground. The flowers scattered across the stone pathway like fallen soldiers. "Diana." Wesley's voice was hoarse as he finally looked up. She walked toward him, her train dragging through the flower petals. When she stood before him, she was no longer the perfect Instagram bride. She was a woman who'd just watched her future collapse in real time. "I can't marry a man who lives on lies," she said quietly, but her words carried across the garden. More phones rose to capture the moment. "I can't build a life with someone who doesn't know the difference between image and truth." "Please." Wesley reached for her hand. "We can fix this. The wedding, the business, everything." Diana pulled her hand away. "Fix it? Wesley, you lied about your ex-wife. You lied about children. You lied to your company. You lied to me." Her voice cracked. "How can you fix something when you don't even understand what's broken?" She turned to face the crowd of guests, many of whom were still recording. "I'm sorry everyone came all this way. There won't be a wedding today, or ever." The murmurs grew louder. Someone near the back called out, "What about the reception?" "Enjoy it," Diana said with bitter humor. "The food is paid for. The champagne is already chilled. Celebrate whatever you want. Just don't celebrate a marriage that's not happening." She gathered her train over her arm and walked down the aisle, her head high despite everything. Her bridesmaids scrambled to follow, their matching blush dresses a pastel parade of confusion. Wesley watched her go, and something inside him finally shattered completely. His phone began buzzing, then buzzing again, then continuously, a swarm of digital wasps delivering poison with every notification. He pulled it out with shaking hands. Investor group chat. "Wesley, what the hell is happening? We're seeing videos." Property development partner. "Contract canceled. Don't contact us again." Major client. "Removing you from all active projects effective immediately." Business associate. "You lied about your financials, about your ex-wife? I defended you, Wesley. I told people you were trustworthy." The messages kept coming, each one another nail in the coffin of his career, his reputation, his life. Marcus watched as Wesley scrolled through his phone, his face going from gray to white. How bad? Everything. Wesley's voice was hollow. Everyone. It's all gone. A commotion near the garden entrance drew their attention. Security guards were attempting to hold back a surge of paparazzi who'd caught wind of the disaster and descended like vultures. Mr. Smith, is it true you committed fraud? Wesley, did you really lie about your ex-wife? What do you say to your investors? Is the wedding canceled? Vanessa was shouting at the security team. Get them out! This is a private event! But her voice was drowned out by the feeding frenzy. Wesley's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID, his attorney. Don't answer it, Marcus advised. Not here, not now. But Wesley answered anyway, some masochistic need to hear how bad it really was. Wesley, what the fuck did you do? His attorney's voice was sharp with anger. I have the SEC on one line and the board's legal counsel on another. They're talking about criminal charges. Do you understand what that means? Wesley ended the call without responding. Around him, the garden was emptying. Guests were leaving in clusters, their phones still out, their voices excited with the thrill of witnessing a spectacular collapse. Nobody stopped to offer condolences. Nobody asked if he was okay. They'd come for a show, and they'd gotten one, just not the one he'd planned. Outside the vineyard's main entrance, Abigail held Gideon's hand, while Cynthia and Favor flanked her other side. The Rolls Royce waited like a silver sanctuary, the chauffeur standing ready. Reporters had broken through the security perimeter, shouting questions that crashed over them like waves. Dr. Amara, how does it feel to confront your ex-husband? Did you plan this? What message do you have for other women? Are you and Mr. Lawson in a relationship? David stepped slightly in front of her, his presence a shield, but Abigail gently touched his arm and stepped forward. She didn't shout, didn't perform. She simply looked at the cameras with the same calm dignity she'd shown inside and smiled. Not a triumphant smile, not vindictive, just peaceful. I have 3 beautiful children, she said clearly. I have a career I love. I have a life built on truth. That's all the statement I need to make. But Wesley Smith told everyone you couldn't have children. Wesley Smith told a lot of lies, Abigail interrupted gently. But the truth is standing right here, and truth eventually always wins. Gideon tugged her hand. Mommy, can we go home now? Yes, sweetheart. We can go home. David opened the Rolls Royce door, and Abigail helped her children inside. Cynthia climbed in first, ever the responsible one. Favor bounced on the leather seats until Cynthia gave her a look. Gideon settled between them, his small tuxedo already rumpled. Before entering, Abigail glanced back at the vineyard. Through the garden archway, she could see Wesley still sitting in that chair, a small figure surrounded by the ruins of his perfect day. She felt no satisfaction in his pain, no joy in his collapse. Just a quiet sense of completion, a door finally closed, a chapter finally ended. Dr. Amara? David stood beside the open door, patient, respectful. I'm ready, she said. She slid into the car, and David followed, settling into the seat across from her. The children were already chattering about the fancy party, and asking if they could have cake later. The chauffeur closed the door, sealing them in quiet luxury. A moment later, the Rolls Royce began to move, gliding away from Vercelli Vineyards like a ship leaving harbor. Wesley stood on the vineyard's front steps, having somehow made his way there without quite remembering the journey. Marcus stood beside him, silent for once, having run out of wisdom to offer. Together, they watched the silver Rolls Royce disappear down the tree-lined drive. The same car Wesley had envied when it arrived, the same luxury he'd spent his life chasing, the same symbol of success he'd bankrupted his integrity to achieve. Now it carried away the woman he'd tried to humiliate, the children who proved his lies, and the boss who'd ended his career. It carried away everything he'd lost through his own choices, his own deceptions, his own refusal to accept truth over image. "She won," Wesley whispered. "She didn't win," Marcus corrected quietly. "She just lived, honestly, gracefully. While you were building facades, she was building a real life. There was never a competition, Wes. You just convinced yourself there was." Wesley's phone buzzed again. Another investor. Another cancellation. Another bridge burned. Behind them, guests were streaming out of the vineyard, some heading to their cars, others deciding to stay for the reception that would now be a wake for a marriage that never happened. The hashtags were already viral. Hashtag Rolls Royce. Entrance. Hashtag Truth. At the altar. /wedding disaster. Karma. Is real. #Drabagay Amara. By evening, the videos would have tens of millions of views. By tomorrow, the story would be on national news. By next week, Wesley Smith would be a cautionary tale, a meme, a warning about the dangers of valuing image over substance. But in this moment, watching that Rolls Royce disappear into the distance, Wesley finally understood something he should have learned years ago. You cannot build a life on lies. You cannot find happiness by causing pain. And revenge has a way of finding those who live in glass houses, throwing stones at everyone around them. The car vanished around a bend, taking with it the last remnants of the life Wesley had tried to destroy, and the future he'd destroyed instead. Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. "Come on, let's get you inside." But Wesley didn't move. He just stood there, watching the empty road, surrounded by the ruins of his perfect day, finally understanding the price of his pride. The sun was still shining. The vineyard was still beautiful. The flowers were still in bloom. But for Wesley Smith, everything had turned to ash. And somewhere on a highway heading north, 3 children laughed in the back of a Rolls Royce while their mother smiled, free at last. 6 months later, spring had transformed Boston into a watercolor painting of cherry blossoms and fresh hope. In the garden behind Abigay's brownstone, 3 6-year-olds ran through the emerging flowers with the boundless energy of children who knew they were loved. "Gideon, don't pull your sister's hair," Abigay called from the French doors, adjusting her pearl earring. "She started it," came the immediate response. "Did not." "Did too." Lydia appeared beside Abigay, holding 2 cups of coffee. The eternal sibling debate. Some things never change. "Thank God for that," Abigay said, accepting the cup with a grateful smile. She was dressed for the evening, a sophisticated navy gown that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. Her natural hair was styled in soft curls that framed her face. She looked like someone comfortable in her own skin. "Big night," Lydia observed. "Head of pediatrics at Boston General. That's not just a promotion. That's a legacy position." It still feels surreal. Abigay watched her children chase each other around the garden fountain. 2 years ago, I was rebuilding my life. Now you're thriving," Lydia finished. "There's a difference between surviving and thriving. You've earned this, Abby." Abigay's tablet chimed on the kitchen counter. She glanced at it, and her hand paused mid-reach. The headline scrolled across the news feed. Former Atlanta real estate developer, Wesley Smith files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Once prominent businessman, faces multiple lawsuits. Lydia saw it too. You don't have to read it. But Abigay tapped the article anyway, skimming the details with clinical detachment. Wesley Smith, 38, once a rising star in Atlanta's competitive real estate market, has declared bankruptcy following a series of business failures and legal challenges. The collapse began 6 months ago when Smith & Lawson Holdings terminated his employment for financial irregularities. Since then, multiple investors have filed lawsuits alleging fraud and misrepresentation. His former fiancée, social media influencer Diana Barrett, has publicly distanced herself from him. Smith could not be reached for comment. There was a photo. Wesley leaving a courthouse, his suit rumpled, his face gaunt. He looked decades older than the man who'd stood at that vineyard altar 6 months ago. Abigail felt something stir in her chest. Not satisfaction, not even pity exactly. Just a quiet sense of how far they'd both traveled from that day. She closed the tablet gently. "You okay?" Lydia asked. "I am," Abigail said, and meant it. "What happened to him is a consequence of his own choices. I don't take pleasure in it, but I don't carry guilt for it either." "That's growth," Lydia said. 6 months ago, you might have felt something different." 6 months ago, I was still processing. Abigail turned back to watch her children. Cynthia was helping Favor climb onto the fountain's edge while Gideon narrated their adventure like a nature documentary. "Now I'm just living." The doorbell rang. Both women exchanged glances. "That'll be your chariot," Lydia grinned. "Or should I say, your very distinguished escort?" Abigail shook her head, but she was smiling as she opened the door. David Lawson stood on her front step in an impeccably tailored tuxedo, holding a small bouquet of orchids. Elegant, understated, nothing like the excessive displays Wesley used to favor. "Dr. Amara," he said with mock formality. "Your carriage awaits." "Mr. Lawson," she replied, accepting the flowers. "Always so punctual." "I'm terrified of being late to anything you're involved in," he said with genuine warmth. "You set a high standard." Over the past 6 months, David had become a steady presence in her life. Not pushy, not presumptuous, just there. He'd attended Gideon's birthday party and somehow ended up playing superhero for 2 hours. He'd sent flowers when she accepted the head of pediatrics position. He'd called just to check in, never demanding time she didn't have to give. They hadn't defined what they were to each other. Didn't need to. For now, friendship was enough. But there was something else growing beneath it. Slow, careful, rooted in mutual respect rather than passion or performance. "Kids," Abigail called. "Come say hello to Mr. David." The triplets thundered inside, all grass stains and bright eyes. "Mr. David!" Favor launched herself at him with complete trust. He caught her easily, spinning her once before setting her down. "Looking sharp, Gideon," David said, noting the boy's attempt to slick his hair down. "Mommy said it's important to look nice for important events," Gideon replied seriously. "Your mom is a wise woman." Cynthia studied David with her characteristic perception. "Are you taking Mommy on a date?" "Cynthia!" Abigail felt heat rise in her cheeks, but David crouched to Cynthia's level, meeting her eyes with the same respect he'd show an adult. "I'm escorting your mother to a charity gala honoring her amazing work. Is that okay with you?" Cynthia considered this gravely. "Will you bring her home safe?" "I promise." "Then it's okay." She turned to her mother. "You look pretty, Mommy." "Thank you, sweetheart." Abigail kissed each of her children. "Be good for Auntie Lydia. Bedtime is 8:30, no negotiations." "No negotiations," Gideon repeated solemnly, clearly planning to negotiate anyway. The Boston Harbor Gala took place in a waterfront venue with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. The space glowed with warm lighting and elegant simplicity. No excessive orchids, no ice sculptures, no desperate attempts to impress. Just refined taste and genuine purpose. The event was raising funds for pediatric healthcare initiatives, organized by the Lawson Foundation. David had insisted Abigail be the guest of honor, despite her protests that she was just doing her job. "Just doing her job," David had replied with a smile. The way Michelangelo was just painting a ceiling. Now, standing in the venue's entrance, Abigail felt genuinely moved. Photos of children she'd treated lined the walls, kids who'd overcome illness, who'd survived against odds, who'd gone on to thrive. Her work made visible and real. "Dr. Amara," A former patient's mother approached, tears in her eyes. "Emma is here tonight. She wanted to see you." A teenage girl appeared, healthy and glowing, transformed from the fragile child Abigail had treated for leukemia 3 years earlier. "Dr. Amara, I'm cancer-free for 2 years now. I'm starting high school in the fall." Abigail embraced her gently. "Emma, you look wonderful." "I'm so proud of you." "I wouldn't be here without you," Emma said simply. These moments, these victories, were worth more than any vindication, any revenge, any satisfaction from Wesley's downfall. This was real. This mattered. David appeared at her elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. "You have a fan club." "I have patients who fought harder than I ever could," Abigail corrected. "I just got to be part of their journey." "Humble as always," David observed. "It's one of your more frustrating qualities." "Frustrating?" "You refuse to acknowledge your own brilliance. Makes it harder to properly celebrate you." Before she could respond, the evening's program began. Hospital administrators gave speeches. Foundation board members shared statistics. And then David took the microphone. "Tonight, we're honoring Dr. Abigail Amara, who was recently appointed head of pediatrics at Boston General Hospital. But titles don't capture who she is." David's eyes found hers in the crowd. She's someone who rebuilds, who perseveres, who turns pain into purpose and challenges into opportunities to help others. He raised his glass. "To Dr. Amara, may we all have the courage to live with such integrity." The room erupted in applause. Abigail felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from recognition. From being seen, not for her image, but for her substance. After the formal program, David found her on the terrace overlooking the harbor. The city lights reflected on the dark water like scattered stars. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for tonight, for everything these past months." "I should be thanking you," David replied. "You remind me what's important." "What's real?" They stood in comfortable silence, watching the boats in the harbor. "Can I ask you something?" David's voice was careful, respectful of boundaries. "Of course." "When you're ready, and only when you're ready, would you consider having dinner with me? Not as colleagues, not as friends helping friends. Just us." Abigail turned to look at him. His expression was open, honest, patient. Everything Wesley had never been. "I'd like that," she said. "When I'm ready." "I can wait," David said simply. "I've waited this long." The drive home took them past familiar roads. The GPS offered a route that happened to pass near Vercelli Vineyards, or perhaps Abigail had subconsciously chosen it. As the Rolls Royce, yes, David's Rolls Royce, the same one from that day, glided past the vineyard's entrance, Abigail looked out the window. The venue was dark, closed for the season. The gardens were dormant. The space that had witnessed such spectacular collapse now sat quiet and empty, already fading into the past. In the back seat, her children slept peacefully, Cynthia's head on Favor's shoulder, Gideon curled against the window. They were safe. They were loved. They were everything Wesley had claimed couldn't exist. The setting sun caught the Rolls Royce's silver paint, turning it gold. In the reflection on the tinted windows, Abigail saw not the vineyard, but herself, strong, whole, moving forward. David glanced at her. "You okay?" "More than okay," she said. "I'm free." As the vineyard disappeared behind them, Abigail thought about that day 6 months ago. The back row seat she'd refused to take, the truth she'd spoken, the dignity she'd reclaimed. Wesley had wanted to humiliate her, to prove she was less than, to show the world his victory over her failure. Instead, he'd given her a gift, the final push to close that chapter completely. To stand in her truth, to show her children that dignity isn't given by others. It's claimed by living honestly, authentically, courageously. The car carried them home through the Boston evening, past the city she'd built her new life in, toward the brownstone, where 3 miracles slept and a future waited to unfold. And somewhere, in an Atlanta bankruptcy court or a lonely apartment, Wesley Smith was learning the hardest lesson of all. You cannot build your pride on someone else's pain. You cannot find happiness by causing suffering. You cannot create a meaningful life from lies and image and desperate attempts to control how others see you. Because one day, inevitably, truth arrives. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in a doctor's office or a divorce lawyer's conference room. Sometimes it arrives dramatically, at a vineyard wedding in front of 400 witnesses. And sometimes, just sometimes, it arrives in a Rolls Royce, carrying a woman in gold with 3 beautiful children and a future built on substance rather than smoke. Abigail smiled, closing her eyes as the car carried her home. She'd won nothing because there had never been a competition. She'd simply lived well. And in the end, that was everything. Never build your pride on someone else's pain, because one day the truth arrives, sometimes in a Rolls Royce.